Okay, let's just get right into this. You've got a test coming up on the Progressive Era, or maybe you're just trying to figure out when exactly the United States decided that, survival of the fittest wasn't a great way to run a whole country.
That's a really good way to put it. I mean, if the Gilded Age was the chaotic, sort of rebellious teenage years of industry,
Right?
then the Progressive Era, we're talking roughly 1890 to 1920 is when the country started setting some rules.
But it wasn't a smooth transition at all. Looking through the notes, the tension here is it's huge. You have this massive clash between the old way...
Laissez-faire.
Yeah, laissez-faire, hands off, let the robber barons do whatever they want, and this new idea that the government should maybe do something.
That is the absolute core of it. For decades, the thinking was that government interference in the economy would, break it.
A market will fix it.
The market will fix it. If a factory is dangerous, well, too bad. If people are living in filth, that's seen as a personal moral failing. The progressives were the ones who looked around at all this and just said, no, this isn't working. We need a referee.
And the people who were, blowing the whistle here weren't who you'd expect. These aren't revolutionaries in the streets.
Not at all.
The typical progressive seems to be, urban, middle class, educated.
Yeah, often Protestant. They were reformers, not radicals. They didn't want to burn down capitalism. They wanted to save it from its own worst impulses. They believed in science, in efficiency.
In data.
Exactly. They thought you could engineer a better society if you just had enough information.
Which is a perfect lead into the muckrakers. I love this term.
It was an insult, originally.
Teddy Roosevelt, right? He was comparing them to a character in a book who only looks down at the filth.
Right. From the Pilgrim's Progress, he was obsessed with raking muck. But the journalists he was talking about, people like Jacob Riis, Upton Sinclair, they kind of wore it as a badge of honor.
Well, their whole point was you can't fix a problem if no one is willing to look at it.
They wanted to shove the public's face right into the mess.
And Jacob Riis is the perfect example. He literally brought light into the darkness with flash photography.
Which was brand new technology in 1890. And, it was literally explosive magnesium flash powder.
Wow.
He'd go into these pitch-black tenement hallways in New York, set off this blinding flash, and capture these images of how the other half was living.
I've seen some of those photos. Bandit's Roost is the one everyone knows.
Yeah.
It's just haunting.
It is.
All these people crowded into these dangerous alleys. It's one thing to read a statistic about poverty, but it's another thing entirely to see a photo of it.
It made the misery real. Undeniable. His book, How the Other Half Lives, it just shocked the middle and upper classes. It stripped away that excuse of, I didn't know.
And it actually worked.
Oh, it worked. It led directly to housing codes, to safety reforms. In fact, Teddy Roosevelt, who was the police commissioner in New York then, he toured the slums with Riis because of that book.
So Riis hit them visually. Upton Sinclair. He tried to aim for the heart, but he famously missed.
I aimed at the public's heart, and by accident, I hit it in the stomach.
Exactly. He wrote The Jungle in 1906 to expose the horrible, brutal exploitation of immigrant workers in the meatpacking plants.
Right. He wanted people to care about socialism, about labor rights.
But all anyone could talk about was what was in their food.
Well, when you're describing, rats being ground up into sausage and workers falling into rendering vats, it tends to overshadow the labor dispute a little bit.
Just a little.
Yeah.
But the public outrage was so immediate and so huge that Congress had to act.
And this is the key thing. If you're studying for that test, cause and effect. Sinclair's book leads directly to the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906.
It set a brand new precedent, really, that the government has a responsibility to make sure your food won't kill you. Seems obvious now, but it was a huge expansion of federal power back then.
Absolutely massive.
Okay, so while the muckrakers are exposing problems, you have other progressives moving in to, actively fix them. Jane Addams is a giant here.
A true pioneer.
She didn't just write about the poor, she moved right into their neighborhood.
The settlement house movement. She founded Hull House in Chicago, and her whole philosophy was what she called socializing democracy. You couldn't help people from a distance.
You had to be there.
You had to live among them, understand their actual needs.
And Hull House wasn't just a soup kitchen, right? It was much more than that.
Oh, far more. It was a community hub. They had a kindergarten, which was a radical idea. They had art classes, English lessons, basic health care. Addams was essentially building a private safety net to help immigrants survive industrial America.
Then on the political front, you have someone like Alice Paul. If Jane Addams was sort of the nurturing side of the movement.
Alice Paul was the warrior.
Definitely. She represents that big shift in the women's suffrage movement from, asking politely for the vote to demanding it.
She looked at the older generation and just thought they were moving way too slow. So she formed the National Women's Party and started using militant tactics.
The kind she'd learned over in Britain.
Exactly. We're talking about the silent sentinels. These women standing outside the White House day in and day out with banners just mocking President Wilson.
During World War I.
During a war, which was incredibly controversial. People called them traitors. They were arrested, thrown in jail, and when they went on hunger strikes.
They were force-fed. It was brutal.
Horrific stuff. But it was effective. The terrible press from the force feedings, plus the fact that women were keeping the country's factories running during the war, it just became impossible for Wilson to ignore. He finally endorsed the 19th Amendment.
It's a classic case of that radical pressure forcing change from the inside.
It is.
So speaking of the inside, let's pivot to the presidents. Because all this protest, all this muckraking, it doesn't become law unless there's a president willing to sign it. And the era really kicks into high gear with Theodore Roosevelt.
The accidental president.
Right. McKinley gets assassinated in 1901, and the old guard Republicans were terrified. They had stuck TR in the vice presidency just to get him out of the way.
To keep him quiet. And suddenly this cowboy reformer is running the country.
And he totally redefines the presidency. He calls it the bully pulpit.
Meaning a great platform to advocate for the people. He didn't see the president as just some administrator. He saw the president as the person who should set the national agenda.
His domestic program was the square deal. Okay, for anyone listening, this is a term you absolutely have to know. What did it mean?
It did not mean socialism. A square deal just meant that everyone, the worker, the owner, the consumer, should get a fair shot. That the rules of the game should be the same for everybody.
No crooked dealing.
Exactly. He saw the government's role as a mediator, a steward for the public interest.
And the best example of this has to be the anthracite coal strike of 1902. This really feels like the moment the government stopped just being a bodyguard for big business.
Oh, absolutely. Before this, if there was a major strike, the president sent in the army to break it. Story over.
Right.
But in 1902, winter is coming, the whole country needs coal, and the mine owners just refuse to negotiate. So TR drags both sides to the White House.
And when the owners still wouldn't play ball, he dropped the hammer.
He threatened to use the army not to break the strike, but to seize the mines and have the government run them.
Wow.
That terrified the owners more than anything. They caved. The workers got a raise and a shorter workday. It was the first time the government acted as a neutral party instead of just a strike breaker.
But TR is probably best known for trust busting. Even though technically, Taft busted more trust than he did.
He did, but TR gets the reputation because of the philosophy. He made this distinction between good trusts and bad trusts.
Okay, so what's the difference?
He wasn't against big business just for being big. If a company got big because it was efficient and innovative, that's fine. But a bad trust was one that used its size to crush competition, cheat consumers, and corrupt politicians. Those are the ones he went after.
Like the Northern Securities Company, the big railroad monopoly.
Exactly. Breaking that one up sent a shockwave through Wall Street. It was a clear message. The government was back in charge.
And we can't talk about TR without talking about the environment. He was a huge outdoorsman.
Conservation was his true passion. Before him, the attitude was basically that America's resources were infinite. Just use them up.
Cut down one forest, move to the next.
Right. TR saw that was a disaster waiting to happen. He set aside something like 150 million acres of federal land. He created the U.S. Forest Service.
But, and this is a distinction that trips people up, he wasn't a preservationist?
That's a great point. He wasn't like John Muir, who wanted to leave nature completely untouched. TR was a conservationist. He believed in the wise, sustainable use of resources.
Managed the forests so we have wood for the future.
Exactly. It was about applying that same progressive ideal of science and efficiency to managing the nation's natural capital.
Okay, so TR sets the stage. We kind of skip over Taft, and we get to the election of 1912. This is like the peak of the progressive era.
It really is. You have TR running again, splitting the Republican vote with Taft, which opens the door wide for the Democrat, Woodrow Wilson.
And Wilson has his own brand of progressivism. He calls it the New Freedom.
And his initial idea was a little different from TR's. While TR wanted to regulate the big trusts, Wilson's plan was more about destroying them to restore competition.
He targeted what he called the triple wall of privilege. So what were the three walls?
Tariffs, banks, and trusts.
Let's start with tariffs. Why was that such a big jut for the average person?
Well, a tariff is just a tax on imported goods. High tariffs protected big American companies, but it meant that you, the consumer, paid higher prices for everything. Wilson pushed through the Underwood tariff, which slashed those rates.
But wait, if you cut tariffs, the government loses its main source of revenue. So how do you make up for that?
That's where the 16th Amendment comes in. It had just been ratified, and it established a federal income tax.
A graduated income tax.
Keyword. Graduated means the more you make, the higher percentage you pay. It completely shifted the tax burden from being based on what people bought to being based on what wealthy people and corporations earned.
Wall number 2, the banks.
The banking system was a total mess, prone to financial panics every few years. Wilson's big answer was creating the Federal Reserve in 1913.
Which is arguably one of the most lasting legacies of the whole era.
It is. It created a central bank, a bank for banks. It gave the government tools to control the money supply and interest rates.
So it could, in theory, cool down an overheating economy or warm up a slumping one.
That's the idea. It was meant to provide stability and prevent those local bank failures from turning into national depressions. It was about professionalizing the U.S. economy.
And finally, Wilson also moved to help labor directly. He passed the Adamson Act.
Yeah, that was huge. It mandated an 8-hour workday for railroad workers. That's the federal government telling a private industry how long its employees can work. Revolutionary stuff.
And they went after child labor with the Keating-Owen Act.
Right. It banned selling goods made by children across state lines. Now, the Supreme Court actually struck that down later.
But the intent was clear.
The intent was very clear. The government was now in the business of protecting its most vulnerable workers.
So if you just zoom out for a second, we've gone from a country with virtually no federal regulation to a country with an income tax, the Federal Reserve, food inspectors, national parks, and labor laws.
In about 30 years, it's a staggering amount of change. It completely reshaped the relationship between the government and the citizen.
But then, 1917, the U.S. enters World War I, and it's like someone just pulled the plug on the whole progressive movement.
The war shifted the entire nation's focus. All that energy that was going into, fixing slums and busting trusts, it all got redirected into building tanks and selling war bonds.
The crusade changed from fixing America to making the world safe for democracy.
Exactly. Though, ironically, the war did help push through two huge progressive goals.
Prohibition and suffrage.
Right. Prohibition was sold as a war measure-saved grain for soldiers, not for beer. And women's suffrage was finally won, in large part because you couldn't really fight a war for democracy overseas while denying it to half your population at home. But the overall reformist spirit, it just kind of fizzled out by the 1920s.
So for the listener who's prepping for that test, there's the narrative. Problems of the Gilded Age.
Lead to the exposures by the muckrakers.
Which lead to the reforms of Presidents Roosevelt and Wilson.
All culminating in a modern regulated government right before World War I hits the pause button.
That's the perfect roadmap. But before we wrap up, I do want to leave you with one last thought. We've mostly painted the progressives as the heroes here.
And in many ways they were.
But there's a darker side to this whole expert knows best mentality.
There absolutely is. The word for it is paternalism. The progressives really believed that they knew what was best for everyone. And because of that, they often just steamrolled the very people they claimed they were trying to help.
They weren't exactly asking the immigrants in the slums what kind of help they wanted.
Not at all. It was clean your house this way, stop drinking, speak English, raise your children like this. It could be incredibly condescending. And in some cases, like with the eugenics movement, which a lot of progressives supported, it was downright dangerous.
It brings up a question we're still wrestling with. Where is that line between the government protecting us and the government controlling us?
Yeah, when does expertise become arrogance? When does knowing better just become taking away people's choices? Progressives gave us so many tools we still use to fix society's problems.
They also left us with the permanent question of who gets to decide what fixed even looks like.
Exactly.
And on that very cheery note, good luck on your test. You are going to crush it. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.